I went to a remote mountain cabin to escape my life and walked straight into his. Mark, a man carved from silence and scars, offered warmth, danger, and something I'd never dared to want. But strange tracks in the snow, a knock in the night, and the arrival of a man who knew too much shattered the safety between us. Secrets from a place called Kearney Ridge bled into every glance, every touch, until I didn't know if I was falling for him or into a trap. We collided in moments that burned hotter than the fire, but each kiss felt like a countdown. Then came the gunshot. The storm and the note he left behind don't wait for me, but keep the cabin warm. Now I'm alone, holding his key, wondering if the next knock will be him or the danger that's been hunting him all along. Would you open the door? The first thing I felt was the cold, not the kind that stings your skin, the kind that crawls into your bones and stays there. My breath came out in white bursts, quick and shallow, as the snow whipped sideways, stinging my cheeks. Somewhere behind me, my phone buzzed in my pocket, but the signal was long gone. Out here, in the middle of the Rockies, even time felt slower, heavier. I hadn't planned to be here. Mom's voice still echoed in my head from last week. Mark said you could use a break. He's got that new place up in the mountains, quiet, might do you good. I'd said yes without thinking, imagining hot coffee and maybe some peace from the chaos of campus. I didn't think about what quiet meant when the nearest gas station was 2 hours away. I didn't think about being alone with him. The last time I'd seen Mark, I was 17. He'd just come back from his final deployment, eyes darker than I remembered, a scar peeking out from under his jaw. We'd barely spoken, then I was still figuring myself out, still hiding behind sarcasm and fake crushes on girls I barely knew. Now, stepping out of my beat-up Jeep into the blizzard, I saw him again. He stood by the cabin, splitting logs like a scene from some old survival film, broad shoulders under a thick black jacket, sleeves pushed up, steam rising from his skin in the freezing air. His hair was shorter now, flecked with gray at the temples, but his face, his face was the same. Strong lines softened by the snow clinging to his lashes. He spotted me instantly. A flicker of surprise crossed his face before it shifted into something warmer. Alex, he called over the wind, his voice low, steady. Didn't think y'd make it through this storm. I pulled my hood tighter. Guess I got lucky. We hugged awkward at first, then tighter, like neither of us wanted to admit how long it had been. His body radiated heat even through the layers, his hands rough against my back. When we pulled apart, there was a look in his eyes I couldn't read, not then, not yet. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and coffee. A fire roared in the stone hearth, shadows flickering across the walls. I set my bag down by the door, shaking off the snow. "You hungry?" he asked, already pouring 2 mugs from the pot on the stove. Starving, we ate in near silence, the kind that isn't awkward, just loaded. Every time I looked up, I caught him watching me, not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet intensity, like he was searching for something he couldn't name. Later, after the dishes were stacked and the wind outside had turned into a low howl, Mark tossed me a heavy jacket. "Come on," he said. "I want to show you something." We stepped back into the cold. The snow had eased a little, but the air was sharp enough to cut. He led me around the side of the cabin, past the stacked firewood and into the trees. The darkness was almost complete, broken only by the glow of his flashlight sweeping over the ground. Mark I started, but he lifted a hand for silence. Then I saw it, a set of deep, fresh footprints, half filled with snow, leading away from the cabin. "Too big to be mine, too fresh to be old. Those weren't here an hour ago," he said quietly. I felt my pulse spike. "Could be an animal." He shook his head. "Not with boots like that." The wind rose, and somewhere far off a branch snapped. Mark's eyes locked on mine, and in that moment I saw something I hadn't expected, not fear, but recognition. "Back inside," he said, his voice sharper now. "We didn't run, but we didn't waste time." Inside, he locked the door, checked the windows. I stood by the fire, my hands numb, my breath uneven. "What's going on?" I asked. He hesitated, then poured 2 more mugs of coffee. His voice was lower now, almost a whisper. "Sometimes people come up here looking for things they shouldn't find." The words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. Before I could ask more, there was a sound outside, slow, deliberate. Footsteps on the porch. Mark's eyes went to the door. He moved toward it, but not before sliding something small and cold into my hand. A key, "If something happens," he said, "you take the truck and you drive east. Don't stop. Don't look back." My throat went dry. Mark, the knock came then. 3 slow, heavy hits that rattled the frame, and just like that, I knew this weekend was going to break me. The knock didn't come again. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind scraping across the roof. Mark stood perfectly still, one hand on the doorknob, the other resting near the side pocket of his jacket. I realized there was a shape there, the faint outline of a handle. "Who would I?" began, but he cut me off with a sharp glance. Then slowly he stepped back from the door. Whoever was outside didn't try again. "Lights," he murmured. I moved to the switch by the wall, killing the overhead glow. The room shrank instantly, shadows swallowing the corners until the only light came from the fire. My pulse roared in my ears. Mark stayed by the door, listening. The storm outside had shifted, less wind, more of that muffled quiet that makes every small sound feel louder. Finally he turned to me. "You all right?" "I think so," I lied. He motioned toward the couch. "Sit. I'll check the windows." I watched him move, steady, deliberate, as if this was a drill head run 100 times. I remembered Mom once telling me he'd spent years in places where danger could come from anywhere, anytime. Watching him now, I understood she hadn't been exaggerating. When he finally sat across from me, his jacket still on, his eyes settled on mine. "Whoever it was is gone. You sure?" He nodded, but it didn't feel like reassurance. I tried to keep my voice even. "You want to tell me what that was about?" Mark's jaw tightened. "Not yet." I hated the answer, but I didn't push. Instead, I wrapped my hands around the mug had left for me earlier, taking a sip of coffee that had already gone lukewarm. My fingers still felt the weight of the key head pressed into my palm. I slid it into my pocket. Outside, the storm picked up again, but inside, the air was thick with something else, the kind of tension you feel in your chest before lightning hits. Mark leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "How long are you planning to stay?" I shrugged. "I hadn't thought about it." "Think about it now," he said quietly. "This place isn't always what it looks like." There was something in his tone, not a warning, not exactly. More like he was testing me. "I'm not scared," I said. His eyes narrowed slightly, like he was weighing whether or not to believe me. Then, without a word, he reached for the blanket draped over the back of his chair and tossed it toward me. "Cover up," he said. "You're shaking." I hadn't noticed until he pointed it out. My hands were trembling, whether from the cold or the adrenaline, I wasn't sure. I pulled the blanket around my shoulders, the faint scent of wood smoke clinging to it. He watched me for a moment longer, then stood. "Come on, somewhere warmer." He led me down a short hallway into a smaller room. It was barely lit, but I could see the heavy quilt on the bed, the cast-iron stove in the corner, a small pile of logs stacked beside it. He struck a match, feeding the flame until the iron began to glow faintly red. "Stay here tonight," he said. I hesitated in the doorway. "You're giving me your room. I'll take the couch. This door locks from the inside. You'll sleep better here." I didn't argue, though part of me wanted to. Not because I felt unsafe, exactly the opposite. The thought of him in the next room, awake, listening for danger, made something in my chest tighten in a way I didn't want to name. He lingered a moment longer, one hand on the doorframe. "If you hear anything, you call my name. Don't open the door until you see me." I nodded. Then, just before he stepped out, he glanced over his shoulder, and "Alex, keep the key close." The door clicked shut. I didn't sleep, not really. The wind moaned against the walls, and every creak of the cabin set my nerves on edge. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I heard footsteps in the hall, slow, unhurried. I sat up, heart in my throat. The doorknob turned. A shadow filled the crack in the doorway. "It's me," Mark's voice said softly. I opened the door, and there he was, hair mussed, eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. "Couldn't sleep," he said simply. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The room seemed smaller with him in it, the air warmer. He didn't touch me, but the space between us felt electric, like a storm about to break. "You okay?" he asked again, quieter this time. I nodded, but my breath told a different story. His gaze held mine a moment longer, then dropped to the blanket around my shoulders, to my hands gripping it tight. He reached out, fingers brushing mine just long enough to send a pulse of heat through me. "Get some rest," he murmured. And before I could say anything, he was gone again. I lay there in the dark, my pulse loud in my ears. the smell of smoke and cold air clinging to the blanket and him until morning. By morning the storm had buried the cabin. The windows framed nothing but white snow packed against the glass, the light outside cold and flat. It felt like the whole world had been erased overnight. Mark was already in the kitchen when I stepped out of the bedroom, sleeves rolled up, steam curling from the pot on the stove. He looked like he'd been awake for hours. Coffee, he asked without looking up. Always, I said, my voice rough from too little sleep. He slid a mug toward me, fingers brushing mine. The contact was brief, but enough to send a shiver up my arm that had nothing to do with the cold. You were quiet last night, he said. I leaned against the counter. You told me to keep the door locked. That wasn't what I meant. His eyes lifted to mine, steady, unreadable. You didn't ask about the tracks. I hesitated. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. He smirked faintly, like that answer was better than he expected. Fair enough, we ate breakfast in silence. Outside the wind had calmed, but the snow kept falling, slow and heavy. At some point he pulled on his jacket and handed me mine. Come on, he said, we need more firewood. We stepped into a world that felt muffled, the snow swallowing our footsteps. The cold hit my face like a slap, but the air was clean, sharp, the kind that wakes you up all at once. Mark walked ahead, boots crunching in the drifts, an axe slung over his shoulder. Halfway to the woodpile he stopped suddenly, scanning the tree line. What is it? I asked SHH. I followed his gaze. At first I saw nothing but the endless white, then movement. A dark shape, too far to make out clearly, slipping between the trees. Animal, I whispered. He didn't answer right away. Maybe we stood there a beat too long before he shook his head and kept walking. I didn't press, but my skin prickled under my layers. Back inside, I was still shaking off the cold when he dropped the wood by the hearth and lit the fire. I crouched beside it, holding my hands close to the flames, feeling the heat seep back into my fingers. Mark came up behind me. I didn't hear him until his shadow fell across mine. You're freezing, he said. I turned my head slightly, and he was right there close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, the faint scar just under his jaw. I'm fine, I said, but my voice betrayed me. He reached past me, grabbed the wool blanket from the couch, and draped it over my shoulders. His hand lingered just for a second at the back of my neck. Warm, steady. You've got to take care of yourself up here, he said, his voice low. I looked up at him, the firelight catching on the edges of his face. I'm not used to someone worrying about me. His gaze held mine, something unspoken flickering there. Maybe you should be. The silence stretched, charged. My pulse was loud in my ears. Then he stepped back, breaking the moment. I'm gonna check the shed, make sure nothing's been moved. I almost asked what he meant, but the way he said it made me think twice. The rest of the day passed slow. We split more wood, fixed a loose shutter, made lunch. But every time our paths crossed in the hallway, by the sink, near the fire, there was that same pull, that same unspoken weight between us. That night the storm finally broke. Stars blinked through the dark sky, the moon spilling silver over the snow. Mark lit a single lantern in the living room, the soft glow throwing shadows over the walls. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed me one. To making it through the storm, he said. I smirked. Was it that bad? His eyes locked on mine. It could've been. We drank. The fire cracked. The silence grew heavy again, not awkward, not empty, but full of the kind of thoughts you don't say out loud. I shifted on the couch, my knee brushing his. I didn't move it, neither did he. You ever think about leaving? I asked quietly. Every day, he said, and every day I don't. His gaze dropped to my mouth, my breath caught. He leaned in just slightly, just enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. His hand rested on the couch beside my thigh, his fingers curling into the fabric. Then, like he remembered himself, he pulled back, his voice low and rough. Get some sleep, Alex. But the look in his eyes told me neither of us would. It started with a knock. Not on the front door, on the side of the cabin, sharp and sudden, like someone hitting the wall with an open palm. Mark was on his feet before I even processed the sound. He grabbed the flashlight from the mantel and moved toward the kitchen window. Stay here, he said. I didn't. I followed him into the darkened kitchen, the only light the thin beam from his hand cutting across the snow outside. There was no one there, just the trail of boot prints curving toward the shed. Those aren't mine, I said. I know, he replied, his voice flat. He pulled on his jacket, grabbed something from the closet, a heavy shape that caught the moonlight. A rifle. Mark, stay inside. The door slammed before I could argue. I paced the kitchen, the cold from the open door seeping into the room. Through the window I caught glimpses of him moving toward the shed, his flashlight cutting in and out. Then he disappeared inside. A few minutes later he was back, but he wasn't alone. Another man followed him, tall, bundled in a dark coat, face shadowed by the hood. Mark kept a hand on his shoulder, guiding him toward the cabin like he was half a prisoner, half a guest. When they stepped inside, the stranger pushed back his hood. He was maybe mid-30s, with sharp features and eyes that flicked to me, instantly assessing, calculating. "This is Alex," Mark said, his tone neutral. "Alex, this is Ryan. The name caught me off guard. You know each other." Ryan's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You could say that." Mark set the rifle against the wall, but didn't let go of the tension in his shoulders. Ryan glanced around the cabin. "You've been busy," he said to Mark. Then, to me, "Betty hasn't told you much." I looked between them. "Told me what?" Mark's jaw tightened. "Not now." Ryan chuckled low, humorless. "He's always been like that. Thinks keeping secrets keeps people safe, but the truth, it just keeps them in the dark." "Ryan," Mark said, a warning in his voice. "No," I cut in. "If there's something I should know, say it." The air felt heavier. The fire popped in the other room, the sound sharp against the silence. Ryan's gaze stayed on me. "Ask him why he left the service." I turned to Mark. His eyes were darker now, guarded. "That's not your business," he said. "It is if it's following you here," Ryan countered. Something inside me shifted. "What's going on, Mark?" He didn't answer. Ryan looked satisfied. "Didn't think so." He stepped back toward the door. "I'll be around." "But you might want to think about how well you really know the man you're sharing a roof with." When the door closed behind him, the silence was louder than before. I faced Mark. "Well." He met my eyes, but there was a distance there now. "It's complicated." "That's not an answer." He exhaled slow, like he was holding something back. "Some things are better left alone, Alex." I felt heat rise in my chest, frustration, confusion, something sharper. "You think keeping me in the dark is protecting me?" "Because it doesn't feel like that. It feels like you don't trust me." "It's not about trust." "Then what is it?" He didn't move, didn't blink. "It's about survival." The words landed heavy. I didn't know if he meant his or mine. I stepped back, the blanket around my shoulders sliding to the floor. "You could just said you wanted me gone." His jaw tightened. "I didn't say that." "No, but you're making it pretty damn hard to stay." We stood there, the space between us charged and cold. For a second, I thought he might close a step toward me, say something that would undo the last 10 minutes. But he didn't. Instead, he turned away. "Do whatever you want, Alex." That hurt more than anything else he could have said. I grabbed my boots and stepped outside into the snow, my breath hitting the night air in fast bursts. The cold bit hard, but it was better than the silence inside. From somewhere in the trees, I thought I heard footsteps. I didn't turn back. The snow was deeper than I'd realized. Each step pulled at my boots, the cold sinking through the seams until my toes went numb. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed space from the cabin, from Mark, from the way his silence felt like a locked door I'd never open. I followed the narrow trail past the shed and into the trees, my breath clouding the air. The quiet out here was different, heavier, as if the snow itself was listening. I didn't hear the snap of the branch until it was too late. A figure stepped from the shadows. "Ryan, walking alone up here," he said, his voice low but carrying. Not the smartest move. I took a step back. "I'm fine." He smiled, slow and sharp. "You don't look fine." His eyes swept over me, pausing in a way that made my skin tighten. "He hasn't told you, has he?" "I'm not interested in your games," I said, my breath quickening. "Oh, you're already in one," he replied. "You just don't know the rules yet." Before I could answer, a gust of wind tore through the trees, and I realized how far I'd wandered. The trail was already half covered, the path back disappearing under fresh snow. Ryan stepped closer, his shadow long in the dim light. "Mark isn't who you think he is. People like him, they draw trouble, and trouble doesn't care who gets caught in the crossfire. Then why are you here?" He smirked. "Let's just say I'm making sure you're not collateral damage." Something in his tone made the hair on my neck rise. I turned to leave, and that's when my foot slipped, ice hidden under the powder. My ankle twisted hard, a burst of pain shooting up my leg. I fell, snow soaking through my jeans. Ryan took a step forward, but another voice cut through the cold. "Get away from him, Mark." He emerged from the tree line, breath hard, eyes locked on Ryan. For a moment neither moved. Then Ryan raised his hands, mock surrender. Just talking. Go, Mark said, his voice like steel. Ryan's gaze flicked between us, then he stepped back into the dark, vanishing as suddenly as head appeared. Mark was at my side in seconds, crouching beside me. You all right? My ankle eye started, but the look in his eyes silenced me. He hooked an arm under my shoulders, lifting me easily to my feet. I leaned against him, the heat of his body cutting through the cold. Every step back to the cabin was slow, deliberate, his arm firm around me. Inside, he lowered me onto the couch and knelt, untying my boot with careful hands. His fingers brushed my skin as he peeled back the damp sock, checking the swelling. "Does this hurt?" he asked, pressing lightly. I hissed a little. He reached for a towel, wrapping it around my foot with practiced precision. The fire crackled behind him, casting his face in flickering light. "You can't just take off like that," he said quietly. "I needed air," I muttered. "You could frozen out there." Or worse, his gaze met mine, something raw behind it. "Do you have any idea what could have happened if I hadn't?" He stopped himself, jaw tight. The silence stretched, thick with everything neither of us was saying. His hand was still on my ankle, warm and steady. Slowly his thumb traced the line of my shin through the blanket. My breath caught. Mark, his eyes flicked to my mouth. "You should rest," he said, but his voice had softened. I leaned back, heart racing, the warmth of his touch lingering even after he stood. He tossed another log onto the fire, the sparks briefly lighting the room. That's when I noticed it, a folded piece of paper tucked under the whiskey bottle on the table. I reached for it, curiosity edging past the ache in my ankle. One line, scrawled in rough handwriting: "He's lying to you. Get out while you can." The words blurred for a second as my pulse spiked. Mark turned, saw what I was holding. His expression shifted, not shock, not guilt. Something darker. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "It was here," I said. "What is this?" He took the note from my hand, crumpling it. "It's nothing." "That's not nothing." Alex, the knock came then. 3 slow, heavy hits against the front door, exactly like before. The 3 knocks echoed through the cabin like they'd been carved into the walls. Mark froze, one hand half curled around the crumpled note. His eyes flicked toward the door, then back to me. "Stay here," he said. "No," I shot back, my voice sharper than I expected. "Not this time." We moved together, the fire throwing jagged shadows across the floor. The knock came again, slower, harder, like whoever was on the other side knew exactly how to get under our skin. Mark grabbed the rifle from its place by the wall, then opened the door in one swift motion. Ryan stood there. Snow clung to his hair, his coat, his boots, but his eyes burned with something hot and deliberate. He didn't look at Mark. He looked at me. "We need to talk," Ryan said. Mark stepped forward, blocking the doorway. "Not now." Ryan smirked, leaning slightly to see past him. "He's not who you think he is, Alex." I felt my stomach tighten. "Then tell me who he is." Mark's voice cut in, sharp as glass. "Ryan." Leave, but Ryan didn't. He tilted his head, eyes locking on mine. "Ask him about Kearney Ridge." The name meant nothing to me, but the way Mark's jaw clenched told me it should. "What happened at Kearney Ridge, Mark?" I asked, my voice low. He didn't answer. Ryan's smile turned cold. 3 people didn't walk away. And let's just say the one who did had a reason to disappear. "That's enough," Mark snapped, stepping forward, the rifle lowering but still in his hands. Ryan glanced down at it, then back up at him. "Some things don't stay buried, old friend." I felt like the room tilted. My hands were cold even near the fire. "Is it true?" I asked Mark. His gaze met mine, and in it I saw something raw, torn between defiance and regret. I did what I had to do. "That's not an answer," I said, my voice breaking. His next step closed the space between us. He reached out, his hand warm on the back of my neck, his eyes locked on mine. "You want the truth?" "Yes." He pulled me closer, so close our foreheads almost touched. His breath was steady, but his words cut. "The truth is, I'm not the man you thought you found up here. And if you're smart, you'll walk away before you find out how bad it really gets." I should have moved. I should have said something, but instead my hand found his jacket, gripping it tight. The air between us was electric anger, fear, desire all crashing together. His eyes dropped to my mouth. "You don't want this," he whispered. "Then stop," I said. He didn't. The kiss hit like a storm, breaking fierce, unsteady, too much and not enough. It wasn't tenderness, it was a collision. My hands were in his hair, his grip firm on my waist, like we were both trying to win and lose at the same time. When we broke apart, both of us breathing hard, I said the only thing I could. "Why does it feel like you're already saying goodbye?" Mark's expression shifted, something breaking through, then hardening again. He stepped back, the distance between us sudden and cold. Ryan was gone. The open door let in a rush of freezing air. Snow blew in, swirling at our feet. Mark looked at me, his voice quieter now, because maybe I am. Before I could respond, a sharp crack split the night, not thunder, not ice, a gunshot. Mark's eyes widened. He moved to the window, scanning the darkness. "What is it?" I asked, my voice tight. His gaze didn't leave the tree line. We're out of time. The gunshots still rang in my ears when the cabin went quiet again. Mark's silhouette was framed against the window, the glow from the fire outlining the hard lines of his shoulders. Outside, the snow fell steady, muffling everything but the sound of my own pulse. He didn't turn to look at me. Stay here, before I could protest. He grabbed the rifle, pulled on his coat, and disappeared into the night. The door slammed, and suddenly the cabin felt too big, the shadows too deep. I stood frozen for a few seconds before limping toward the window. My breath fogged the glass as I tried to see through the swirling white. At first there was nothing, just the shape of the shed, the ghostly line of trees. Then movement. Mark heading toward the tree line, his figure swallowed by the dark. I waited. Minutes passed. The fire popped. The clock ticked. But there was no sound from outside. My ankle throbbed. Pain sharper now, but it was nothing compared to the weight in my chest. Finally I couldn't stand it. I pulled on my boots and jacket, ignoring the protest from my leg, and stepped into the cold. The air hit like a wall. My breath burned in my throat as I followed his footprints, already softening under the falling snow. I called his name once, then again, but the sound felt small, swallowed. By the night, when I reached the edge of the trees, I stopped. The trail split, one set of footprints heading deeper into the woods, another looping back toward the road. I didn't know which was his. Somewhere ahead a branch cracked. My heart leapt, but all I saw was shadow, shifting between the trunks. Then nothing. I stood there until the cold seeped into my bones, until my fingers went numb around the key in my pocket, the same key had given me that first night. When I finally turned back, the cabin looked different, smaller, almost fragile against the endless snow. Inside, fire had burned low, casting the room in a dull orange glow. On the table there was something that hadn't been there before, a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened it. Just one line, written in his tight, sharp handwriting. "Don't wait for me, but keep the cabin warm." I didn't know if it was a good-bye or a promise. I sat in his chair, the one still warm from where had been, and stared at the flames until they blurred. Every sound outside could have been him: footsteps, the shift of snow from a branch, the wind pressing against the walls, but the door never opened. By morning the storm had buried the world again. No fresh footprints, no sign of him. Just the note, the rifle leaning against the wall, and the key heavy in my palm. I kept it, not because I believed he'd come back, but because part of me knew if I ever turned it in the lock again, I might still feel him on the other side. Some nights I dream of that knock. 3 slow, heavy hits on the door. I never know if he'll open it, and maybe that's the point.